Hi, this is Maryland Comptroller Peter Franchot. I may not listen to every podcast out there, but I do listen to the Maryland Crabs.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Fernay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. September 28th, the second annual Twist and Stout Festival at Quiet Waters Park along the shores of the South River. Twist and Stout, a Maryland wine, craft beer, food, and arts festival presented by the Anne Arundel County Department of Recreation and Parks along with the Maryland Wineries Association. Sample dozens of craft beers and Maryland wines. There's music all day starring the Groove Spot Band along with the Naptown Brass Band and Vertigo Red. Watch the Plein Air Painters and shop dozens of artisans, crafters, and food trucks. Tickets are on sale now at twistandstout.org. That's TWISTANDSTOUT.org. September 28th, Twist and Stout at Quiet Waters Park, noon till 6. Tickets at twistandstout.org.
Lately, it seems I've been on a roll with having conversations about things that I never thought I would have conversations with. I talked to Alamo at Intimates all about bra fitting and bras and everything a couple of weeks ago.
That's an education right there.
And now I'm here with Becky Morgan and Perla Piekutowski, who are with with a Center for Surrogate Parenting here in Annapolis. And since my children are all grown up and somewhat flown the coop at this point, I don't have a need for surrogacy, but I think this is just a great service that you guys are offering, and we wanted to learn a little bit about it. So welcome to both of you. And Becky is the administrative coordinator, and Perla is the program administrator and a case manager.
Correct.
Okay, and those are the official titles there. And
I've actually moved more into social media and marketing. I need to update my business cards.
Okay.
But
I do want to give Gene Deems from DNR a shout out because you guys hooked up with him at the Wendy Winters PR Bazaar, and he was like, "Oh, you got to talk to these two women. They're great. This is a fabulous, interesting thing." And
right.
he was so right. So I do want to give a quick shout out. Thank you to Gene for that. So first thing we want to get off of the table here is that there's been some surrogacy news in the papers lately about a guy named Greg Blosser, who was the owner of a company called the Surrogacy Group that scammed dozens of women or dozens of families, dozens of potential families, I guess is the word, out of probably hundreds of thousands of dollars collectively. He was arrested by the FBI and currently sitting in jail, which is probably the most appropriate place for him. But you guys are not the Surrogacy Group, and I'm sure this is probably something that really gets your goat, that you've got somebody giving the industry and the service a bad name.
Yeah, we are definitely not the Surrogacy Group. The Surrogacy Group, I can't even say it, they had only been around since 2012, so they'd been in operation for 7 years, whereas the Center for Surrogate Parenting has been operating for nearly 40 years. So, yeah, they didn't have an awful lot of experience in what they were doing, I guess. But yeah, it's just awful to see that in the press and the stories of the families that have been taken advantage of.
Well, it really is. I mean, it's you talk about kicking somebody when they're down. I mean, this is when you scam somebody out of this. I mean, this is taking somebody at the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable positions of their life. And I know I've had several friends that have adopted from China and other places across the world, and the hopes get up, and then something happens. And I know from friends the pain that goes through when you lose the opportunity to have a family, and reprehensible. And I'm really glad that they caught him in Florida and they put him in jail, and hopefully he gets to stay there for a long way.
It's very unfortunate because it gives a bad name to the industry. Such a beautiful process to help somebody have a baby. But you should know, out of about 1,000 agencies that are out there, there have been cases like this only 4 times.
So surrogacy, explain, what surrogacy is for those that don't know. This is essentially finding somebody to carry a child to term for a couple or a single that is unable to conceive or perhaps unwilling to, I guess, or not wanting to.
So everybody that comes through our program has to have a medical necessity for surrogacy.
Okay.
So
you have couples, for example, that have been trying to conceive for years and years, and they've been unsuccessful, and their physician recommends that they try with a surrogate, because sometimes they can't point out what the issue is, but they do have good embryos, so they come to us and try to change one piece of the equation to see if that will work. And in most of the cases, that's the trick, and they end up getting pregnant and having a baby.
Okay. So, I mean, what you guys are doing is not any kind of in vitro fertilization, is it? I guess I'm going to say, are you dealing with purely infertile women or infertile men?
Both.
Both of them. So you have women that may be older, the age that is appropriate for carrying a baby. Sometimes, you have single women that need a sperm donor to create their baby. Sometimes there are issues with the embryos, and you don't know whether it's the eggs of the woman or it's the sperm. And so they get donated eggs or sperm from somebody else, and they try first on their own, and if it doesn't happen with them, then they try a surrogate. So there are several different circumstances in which things are just not working out for them, and they are changing one piece of the equation to see which one will actually be successful.
Okay, so now, as far as what your agency does, I mean, are you actually doing procedures?
No. So we work with other professionals. So we're working with medical professionals, we're working with mental health professionals, we're working with legal professionals.
I guess all that comes into play, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the Centre for Surrogate Parenting is the piece of the puzzle that brings all those other pieces together. So we're working with intended parents that apply to our program. We're working with surrogate mums who apply to our program. We're screening the surrogates. We're matching the intended parents to the surrogates and then guiding them throughout all those other parts and putting them in touch with experts.
Right. What makes somebody want to go the surrogacy route as opposed to adoption? I mean, I know there's some sort of a little bit of a preference, if you will. I know that adoption of, we'll say, babies from the U.S. is a lot more difficult, not necessarily in the process, but in the, I kind of hate to say this because it commoditizes it, but the availability. There's far fewer U.S. babies that are put up for adoption than there are, say, in China or perhaps Korea or whatnot, which is where a lot of I know some of the Eastern European nations have a number of them as well. Is that just a personal choice to go surrogacy versus adoption? Obviously, I think if a woman is medically able to carry a baby, in the case of that, or a male is able to produce viable sperm, there's a desire to have, I guess, a part of the DNA into the child.
I think most people would like to have the opportunity to have a child that is genetically related to them. For many, adoption might not be an option. For same-sex couples, sometimes they have difficulty. I can't remember where I heard the story, but I remember either reading or somebody was telling me about a situation recently where there was a same-sex couple that had adopted a child, and then the child's genetic family found out that they had been adopted by a same-sex couple, by a gay couple, and the child was removed from her adoptive parents because they didn't want her to be adopted into a gay family. So for some people, adoption really isn't an option.
Well, you talked about a same-sex couple and whatnot. I know that within the United States that gay marriage has been legalized and whatnot, which is just a fabulous, gigantic step forward. But was that an issue for the industry prior to that? I mean, how did a gay couple, get a child if they wanted to? Now, I mean, I don't think there's ever been any, real legitimate conversation saying, oh, well, two moms can't possibly raise a kid or two dads can't possibly raise a kid. But I mean, was that a problem with the surrogacy industry before? Would you be able to place a surrogate in a same-sex couple?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
CSP helped their first gay couple more than 30 years ago. So we were the first agency to work with a gay couple, and have been doing it ever since. And we have lots of surrogates that want to work with a gay couple.
In our program, the surrogates get a choice of who they want to help. So we give them options, and we ask them in advance whether they would be willing to help us same-sex couple or if they prefer to work with an heterosexual couple. We ask them even if they want somebody who's local versus international. And so they get options and they get to choose who they are interested in helping. Many of them are, the majority of them are open to helping same-sex couples.
Wow. Okay. This is something sort of blowing my mind that I never really thought about. That, I mean, you think about what's going through the minds of the parents or potential parents, but this is a real, counseling thing for whether it be a sperm donor on the male end or a female that is carrying a baby to term, that they've got a say in this. I mean, this is ultimately part of their child. Well, do people, get into this whole choosing of what type of a child they may have, where they've got, I'd like a blonde hair, blue-eyed, or a red hair, fair skin type of a thing. Is that something that happens, or?
It may happen on the egg donor side, but with the surrogate, the intended parents are using either their own embryos or embryos created with an egg donor, so the surrogate has actually no influence on how the baby is going to look. Okay,
that makes sense.
I think as much choice as it gets down to on our end is maybe whether they're implanting a male or female embryo. That's about as...
And that is not necessarily an option with every clinic.
Right.
There are clinics,
Yeah.
Well, I've got to think that parents that are looking for a child that, by the time they've come to you, they've tried, and it's come to the realization, the disappointment that it's not working, whatever it may be. So I think that I would personally, for me, I would think the gender or the looks or anything like that would be very, very not even secondary. I mean, it's just not an issue. I mean, I'm looking for a healthy baby to start my family, and that's the blessing that I need.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Now, do surrogates have anything to do with the child once the child is born? Beyond, is that an option?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. It's something that CSP encourages. More often than not, I think everybody stays in contact, and they become like families to each other. They go on vacations together. It's beautiful.
Well, I think it's funny. I've been reading an article recently where they're talking about adoption, and some states will, when somebody adopts, they change the birth certificates to reflect the adoptive parents' names. Mm-hmm. And they will not give, and it has to do with a birth year, but they will not give, even with a court order, the birth parents' names to somebody, which is ridiculous. I mean, as far as family health history and everything else that comes, how many diseases are out there today that we didn't know existed 20, 30, 40 years ago? And I think that's beautiful that they can remain, in touch and with that as well. I mean, I think it's a neat bond.
Mm-hmm. That is another one of the options that we discussed during our interview. We talked to the intended parents about their wishes and hopes to remain in contact with the surrogate after the birth. And this is also discussed by a mental health professional with the surrogates when they interview for our program, because we only want to match a surrogate with a couple and vice versa who have the same wishes and ideas and expectations about the relationship that they want to create during the process and after the baby is born.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about the process of surrogacy. I mean, you're talking about matching the surrogate with the parent and whatnot, and I've got to imagine this is like, you're before any kind of a medical procedure goes on. I mean, you're building a relationship. I mean, it seems like there's this whole courtship and this whole dating thing. And
it is. A lot of them say it's just like online dating. It really is. Yeah.
To figure out, which is again, this is kind of blowing my mind as I think about this, but it's true. I know I have a photographer friend, and she does a lot of wedding photography, and she says, "I will not do a wedding unless I've done the engagement."
Right.
Because she says, I can get there in the engagement, I can see what sets them off, I can see what buttons I pushed or didn't push or I need to push, I can see how they work to criticism and everything, and all this stuff comes into play in shooting the wedding, the biggest day of their life at that point. And she says, if it doesn't work at the engagement, I just won't do it.
Yeah.
Because there's no sense in me getting frustrated and them getting frustrated, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it probably is very similar to this. I mean, you've got to have you've got a third person that's involved in this whole most intimate process of creating a family. Mm-hmm. And you gotta like them. I mean, they can't be a jerk.
And they are all so nervous when they are going to meet each other. What should I say? What should I ask? We have a mental health professional in that first meeting, and she's going to moderate the entire thing, and she's going to help break the ice and the nerves and ask questions to make sure that everybody's in sync with what they want. And then, they can go get acquainted on their own. But the first meeting is typically organized by one professional because they're all very nervous. They don't know what to say. They want to be liked so much by the other party. So yes, it's a little bit like dating.
And we know why families apply to the program. They would like to have a child and start a family. But what's the driving force behind a surrogate to sign up?
Most of them just have a need to help. They're very giving people. They have had easy, uncomplicated pregnancies themselves. A lot of them have been touched by infertility. They've maybe seen it in family or close friends. A lot of them might work in the fertility field, so we actually have quite a few nurses that apply to our program, and they see it in their business, how people are affected by infertility, and it's really just
so it's not necessarily a financial thing.
No,
if I came to you and said, "Hey, I want to make, I don't know what it is, but I want to make $10,000 and be a surrogate." I mean, is that something probably that you would look twice at?
Yeah, that would be a red flag for sure, and that comes up. That's part of our screening of surrogates, is finding out their reasons for wanting to be a surrogate. If their reasons are purely financial, then that would be an issue. If the compensation is kind of a secondary reason, so if they're saying, well, it would be nice, we would use that money as a deposit on our house, or we'll put it in funds, college funds for our kids, then that's fine. But their main reason, we're looking for them to work.
It shouldn't be a second job.
No, absolutely. And it isn't, and it's not easy money. Sometimes when you think about the compensation, I think our compensation is roughly between 40,000 and 55,000, somewhere in there. And if you think, well, that's a decent chunk of money, but when you think you could be working with a couple for 2 years, that's not that much when you spread it out.
No, not at all.
They want to make an impact in somebody's life. Karen was telling me yesterday a story of a surrogate who told her, I'm doing this because I want to make an impact in the world. And I can't cure cancer, but I've had healthy pregnancies and I enjoy being pregnant. So I figured this is the way that I can contribute in the world and make a family happy.
Let's walk through the process, okay? We've got a couple that wants to start a family via surrogacy, and for whatever their situation is, whether it's same-sex, unable to conceive, or whatever it is, they contact you. And what happens next?
I answered their basic questions on the phone, but I highly encourage them to schedule a full consultation at the office if they are in town or via Skype to go over the process in detail. And this consultation is really long. It is 4 hours. It is 2 hours with a case manager. That's usually what I do, to go over the process in detail, go over the financial aspects, go over the step-by-step. Then they meet with a mental health professional about their wishes and their wants when it comes to the surrogate. Who would be their ideal surrogate? What kind of relationship they wish to have? How often do they plan to visit her? How much involvement do they want to have? And then they meet with an attorney to talk about the legalities of the process, and that is the legal approach for the finalization of the rights depending on the state. What would be the ideal surrogate for them? Say a local couple that is married using their own eggs and sperm are going to have more possibilities when it comes to states versus, somebody who's single that is using a sperm donor. They are more limited as to what states they can work in. So they discuss all of that with an attorney. So it's about 4 hours. That is before they can get started in the process. And if after that meeting everybody's comfortable in moving forward, then we move forward and the couple has to write a letter for their surrogate. So that is the first piece of information that we need in order to make a presentation to each other.
That's their online dating profile.
Exactly.
So this letter to the surrogate. This is, hey, my name is John, and I'm together with my wife or girlfriend of X years, and we wanted to have a child, but we haven't, and we have a great home in the suburbs, and I'm employed, and I inhaled in high school, but I haven't since, or
You probably don't want to say that.
but you're pitching yourself to the surrogate.
Yeah.
And does the surrogate in turn have to pitch themselves to the couple?
Yeah,
Yes.
so the surrogates have an extensive screening process that they go through. So that generally takes 2 to 4 months for them to get all their paperwork in. So we're running background checks, we're asking for their medical records, getting copies of employment history, all that kind of thing, and their personal profile, which is their online dating profile, as it were.
And this is the first thing they see for each other. When, the counselor proposes a match, the surrogate is receiving that letter first before she even meets the intended parents. We call them intended parents. Okay. And the intended parents see that profile first before they meet their surrogate. First, they have to like each other in paper before they do that first meeting.
Okay, yeah, well, that's Match.com. You sit there and this looks like it might work. Okay, let's meet and see whether it does. Gosh, that's fascinating. And the surrogate, I'm assuming, gets the right to say no immediately, right? For whatever reason.
Yeah.
But in our program, what's different about us is that we have a counselor, whether it's a psychologist or a psychotherapist, and she is going to propose matches based on personality, based on what they want from each other, the type of relationship. So a surrogate is not going to get the profile of all the couples that we have in the program and vice versa. She's only going to get those ones that are compatible with her. Right. And so they may get 2 or 3 profiles to choose from, and once they choose, then the couple gets her profile.
Okay. Now, how many surrogates? I mean, I get this sort of bizarre picture of a bunch of, women in a closet behind, your office or something like that, or the Match.com where you're swiping left and right. But, I mean, how many surrogates do you work with? I mean, if I was looking to be a surrogate, I mean, I obviously apply to do that, and I go through, and you guys make sure through psychological and background and everything else that I am a viable candidate to be a surrogate. But how many actually work with you? I don't know whether you have inventory is not a really good word, but I mean, there's how many people that that you work with?
On average, we would have between 40 and 60 surrogates in screening at any one time.
Oh,
so
wow.
we're accepting people applying to our program regardless of how many intended parents are signed up. So we're not, we don't wait for an intended parent to come to us and then we're like, okay, we need to find anybody that will work.
What areas do you serve? Where do your clients come from? I mean, you're based here in Annapolis, I know, but...
We have an office in Annapolis. Our head office is in Encino in California. And we work with surrogates all over the states, apart from the few where surrogacy is illegal, which currently I think includes New York, Michigan, Louisiana,
How many surrogacy organizations are there in the United States? Do you have any idea?
There are thousands.
Thousands?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this
now,
is...
You were asking about the intended parents. They come from the United States and from all over the world.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I've got to imagine that a couple looking to, or somebody looking to start a family, when surrogates don't match, there's some impatience that goes on there. It's like, oh my gosh, I've got to imagine they've got to go, when will a surrogate pick me? And is that the same thing on a surrogate? It's like, well, when will a family pick me?
Yeah, I think it's equal on both ends. There, I suppose that's the real beginning. Even though the surrogates have been working with CSP for months at that point, that it all becomes real once they start receiving those profiles and once that match happens. So, yeah, it's.
I picture that. Going home and going, yes, it's starting to work. Doing this crazy dance, hoping to, dancing around the living room naked or something like that. So we start with a 4-hour interview. Now, is there a cost involved with a 4-hour interview? I mean, that's...
The agency doesn't charge and the attorney doesn't charge, but the counselor charges because she's independent from us. She's just coming to meet the couple, and also because she has to issue a letter of clearance that is later going to be used to be sent to the clinic when there is a match.
Okay, so there is a cost to get that started. So that also shows a commitment to the parent as opposed to having somebody come in, hey, let's just check this out, and you're potentially not wasting your time. To do that. So we've gone through this 4-hour interview. Everything seems to be okay. The counselors have looked and said, yeah, I think we're good matches and whatnot. We write our pitch letters to each other. And then what happens? I mean, how long does the whole process take and what's involved in the process?
So when the couples already come with frozen embryos, as soon as they complete that letter, they are ready to be matched. On the surrogate side, when a surrogate becomes available that is compatible with this couple, the counselor is going to send this couple's letter to the surrogate to review and decide if she wants to help them. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes they may be getting 2 or 3 profiles. So the amount of time that the couple is going to be waiting depends on who we have available and who chooses them. But typically they are waiting, here in the East Coast, they are waiting for 1 to 3 months for a potential match. When a surrogate elects to work with a couple, then they get her profile, and if they like her, we first organize a Skype meeting if they are not in the same location.
Right.
And if they are in the same location, everybody meets in person, and that's called a match meeting. So that's next, a match meeting. If everybody likes each other, then the next step is for the surrogate to go to the clinic where the couple has their embryos stored for an in-person screening.
Okay.
And if the doctor says yes, they'll work on contracts, they'll fund an escrow account, and then we're ready for the medical process.
Okay. Now, and your surrogates, are they local here to Annapolis for the most part, or are they, again, all...
No, they're all over the US. We do work with surrogates locally, but we work with surrogates all over.
And the procedures, I'm presuming, are done in the town or hometown of the surrogate?
So
not necessarily.
The transfer of the embryo into the surrogate, that would take place in the fertility clinic that the intended parents are working with.
Okay.
So that would need to be in a state where surrogacy is legally recognized. So you couldn't do a transfer in Michigan. So if it was intended parents that lived in Michigan, it doesn't prevent them from pursuing surrogacy. but they couldn't legally do the transfer. The baby couldn't legally be delivered in Michigan. So the surrogate is working with the intended parents fertility clinic up until about 12 weeks of pregnancy, and at that point she's released to her own OB, and she would be seen by them throughout the duration, the rest of her pregnancy, and she would deliver in the hospital of her choosing, local to her.
Okay. And the states that this is illegal in, I mean, is this some kind of a human trafficking type law that you're saying that you're selling?
It's criminalized, and what they say is that the surrogate is the mom because she's delivered the baby. Okay. So that's what, New York and Michigan, that's their stand on surrogacy. Okay. That's why we can't do it in there.
And some of them will, surrogacy might not be illegal in itself, but compensated surrogacy might be illegal. So you could do altruistic surrogacy where you receive no compensation other than your actual expenses. But if you received anything over and above that, then that would make the process illegal.
Okay. So we've done the transfer, we've done the implant and everything else, and the surrogate then carries the child to term. Mm-hmm. Do the parents just hang out for 9 months, or are they visiting, or are they just waiting for UPS? Is Amazon bringing it? I don't know.
They have contact with each other all through that. So now they've met each other in person. They have each other's numbers. So the intended parents are going to be supportive of this journey. They can go to as many doctor's appointments as they want and see their baby on the screen. Mm-hmm. And so they are active participants of this process. Sometimes they even go shopping together with the surrogate for the car seat.
They send them all in their first trimester. They'll receive packages of all the anti-nausea, teas and sweets and stuff, and so they're doing as much as they can to, it's their baby, they're involved in it.
They are a team.
Do most of your surrogates and parents, do you find that most of them are in the same general area? I mean, I'm just trying to think that if I've got a surrogate that's in LA and I'm here on the East Coast, there's a lot of travel involved in that. I mean, maybe I'm going to go out and rent an apartment for a year and hang out there. Maybe get a temporary job in Starbucks or something like that while I'm waiting. Or are they tend to be in the same general area where they have access to each other?
It is not necessary that they are in the same general area, because we have to remember the surrogates are mothers themselves, and many of them have full-time jobs. So they are busy on their own with activities for their children. So they like the contact and they like for the intended parents to come visit, but it's not necessarily something that they can do on a daily basis because they have their own lives. Right. So, for example, I work with a lot of couples from Europe, from the UK, and their surrogate is all the way here. So they come during the pregnancy for the big appointments, for the first trimester screening, for the mid-pregnancy ultrasound, and for the delivery of their baby. Some of them can come more often. You also have those local intended parents that have a local surrogate, but that doesn't happen that often.
Okay. You mentioned that they've got lives, full-time jobs, and other mother parents, and the surrogate is a mother of other child. Does your screening and does, I guess, the psychological screening of this extend out into the surrogate's family at all?
So if they're married or if they're living with their partner, then they would come along to the psychological interview as well. We would conduct background checks on their partner as well. Okay. We're wanting to know about the support system that they have if they're not married or if they don't have a partner, who are the people that they would lean on, who would help them out with childcare. So it does, we're looking into their family, we want to know.
And there is medical testing too in the partner or husband. And he also has to meet the intended parents. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just sort of curious as far as like children. Mm-hmm. If a surrogate has two other children. Yeah. And what is the impact on a child that maybe say, I mean, you said the ages were 22 to 40 roughly?
21 to 42.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's the impact of a child? Is like, okay, all of a sudden mommy's getting bigger, and has the baby, and all of a sudden it doesn't come home. Has that been a problem, or is that something again?
No, they kids take it so well. It's what mom does.
Yes, and they know this baby is not coming home, but that they are taking care of this baby. So what we encourage the intended parents to do after the baby is born is to have a farewell lunch or dinner, a get-together, where the surrogate, her husband, and her kids are there, and the intended parents with their new baby, so that the kids get to say goodbye to that baby and see the happy family. That's what they've helped create.
That's really kind of a neat thing.
It is, and we hear so many times from surrogates how beneficial the whole process has been for their children and what they've learned from it and how they've learned to be accepting and giving, and it's just
it's an ultimate gift. It really is to do that. Okay, so we're going through our life, we're going to jobs, we're dealing with Little League and softball, and disciplining your two little kids that are driving you crazy while carrying this other one. It's hot as heck in August, and you're getting ready to have the baby. Again, the parents would come down and typically be there for the birth.
Mm-hmm. Ideally, any pregnancy, there's always the unexpected. So
there is always the unexpected, but typically they will arrive a few days before the estimated delivery date so that they can be present. If it's a vaginal delivery, a normal delivery, they can be in the room if everybody allows them to be. But if it's a C-section, then they have to wait outside.
Sure. Mm-hmm. That was going to be a question. I said, typically are these C-sections or a normal delivery, and they could be either way, and that's just how the pregnancy ends up working out.
Yeah.
And then the immediate pre or postnatal care is primarily through the surrogate. I mean, does she get into nursing, or is that
no? The baby is immediately recognized as the intended parents. So the surrogate is probably in her own room at this point, while the intended parents and the baby are in their own room in the hospital. Sometimes they do pump breast milk and we'll ship it off to
get it started and
yeah, and they sometimes they're shipping it for months.
Yeah.
Right.
But no, they're not nursing. They always know that this baby isn't theirs. They're not giving a baby away. They're giving a baby back to its parents. So yes, there's a bond, but it's not a bond like they have with their own children.
Sure. And my thinking is, if I'm a parent and all of a sudden I've seen this just absolute wonderful gift appear, I want to get home. I want to start my life. I want to, we need to start applying for colleges tomorrow. We've got the excitement here, especially for first-time parents, to do that. I mean, how long does the family versus the surrogate, how long do they remain together after the child arrives?
We recommend minimum contact of when you go back home with your baby, let your surrogate know that you've arrived safely. Then be in touch at least at the 1 month mark, 3 months, 6 months, and year in the first year, and then each additional year once a year. Okay. That is the minimum, but organically they're keeping in touch more often than that because they've built a relationship, they've been together for this long, they've become friends. So they call each other, they ask each other questions, they visit each other on vacations. So we have recommendations, but we see beautiful bonds form and friendships are created forever.
Well, I imagine everybody's a little bit different too. I imagine after carrying a baby for 9 months, which I would never wish on my worst enemy, but that's there would be some sense of, regardless of whether I went into this as a surrogate, there's got to be some sense of a loss, and I'm going to say some sort of I don't want to say a depression, but a postpartum letdown on the part of a surrogate.
There can be. It does happen, and it's not so much of I'm not pregnant, I don't have a baby. It's more they're missing the intended parents.
Okay.
And the relationship, at that point, the intended parents, yes, their focus has switched to their baby, and so it's that kind of thing that they miss, I think, more than anything.
But so after the going away party, how much time between the the birth and the going away party? Is that just till the baby is medically cleared? The doctor says, he's healthy. We don't have jaundice. We don't have any ICU issues or anything like that.
It depends on each specific situation. You have intended parents that are local and they want to go back to their hometown as soon as possible, while the international ones are the ones that are staying a little bit longer because they have to wait for the passport. And so they're hanging around longer.
Again, a legal complication I totally wouldn't have thought that needs to be covered. So if you've got an international couple or an international parent, they've got to wait for a passport to get the child out of the country.
Mm-hmm. And the airlines also have certain requirements. There are airlines that let you fly with a newborn baby earlier than others. Some others are going to say the baby needs to be at least so many days. There's
got to be some inoculations, I'm sure, that as far as immigration into other countries, that you've got to be, depending on where you're coming from and everything else. And boy, this is a complicated process.
There's so many moving
the regular way is just much easier.
There's so many moving parts, and there's no this is the process, because every single process is so different.
It's their own world.
Yeah, and you've worked with CSP for 10 years, Perla, and I've been with the company only for 2 years, and just when you think, okay, I get it, then something else happens that is completely brand new, and it's every case is unique, every case is different.
Well, and everything that you told me is, and back in my mind, I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm using the East Coast, West Coast. I'm saying, okay, so flying out to California, hanging out there, the doctor's appointments, the psychologist appointments, the counselor appointments, meeting with you, the 4 hours on the phone, and the cost involved. And then, of course, I'm remembering about that scammer that had the other thing in the tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, this is not a cheap. This is a financial commitment, a lifetime commitment, and everything else. I'm assuming it's not cheap, and I'm assuming a lot of it's not covered by any kind of insurance, correct? Or am I wrong on that?
The surrogacy process is not. Some intended parents have insurance that covers the IVF portion of the process to create their embryos, but that is the extent of it.
Mm-hmm.
And presuming that the surrogate has health insurance, is that covered under typically?
So, if we have our health insurance checked by attorneys to see if it will cover a surrogate pregnancy. And we're only using her insurance once she's released from the fertility doctor. So once she's released to her own OB, then her appointments and the delivery would come under her own insurance. The intended parents are covering co-pays and deductibles. If her health insurance does not cover surrogacy, then we will help her find a policy that will cover the surrogate pregnancy.
And the intended parents will pay the premiums.
Okay, and then so you could pay it outright. You could finance it and whatnot there. What's the time frame from the time I've got the whole 9 months in the middle that's sort of taken care of, but roughly, I think you said about 3 or 4 months before you really get the match and things start from the time I make the first phone call to you and, and the birth, are we looking at 15 to 18 months?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the average is about 18 months, right?
Yeah, I know your business. I know math.
You can do so.
You're paying attention. So you start the process today. Say you do the full consultation today. Tomorrow you decide to start, to sign the agreements. It takes about 3 months to match you in average. Some intended parents are matched within weeks, but let's say 3 months. And then from the moment they are matched till an embryo transfer, in average it takes 4 months because the surrogate has to go to the IVF clinic. You have to complete contracts and you have to find your trust account. She needs to start taking medication for the cycle. So about 4 months. So it's been 7 months before an embryo transfer happens.
Okay. And in a regular pregnancy, in a regular conception, there are complications all the time. You have miscarriages and whatnot. Is that still the same thing? Or are the surrogates that you have somehow deemed a little bit more or less susceptible to complications, or is that just the way it is?
We still have complications. It's an IVF pregnancy, which comes with its own complications and its own risks. We do have miscarriages. We do have losses. It's as heartbreaking as you would imagine.
I've got to imagine, because it's heartbreaking for double the amount of people.
And it's
easily.
Yeah, I guess because there's so many people invested in it, and the surrogates come in and they have this dream of, I've had my own 3 completely uncomplicated and easy pregnancies, so I can do this. And then when they, maybe the first transfer doesn't take, and it's heartbreaking and it hits them, and sometimes they have a sense of failure, and they have that's maybe their first experience of infertility, so they're getting a touch of what their intended parents might have been going through for years. So it's hard on everybody.
Right. Now, what happens when there's something like that happens? I mean, do you guys guarantee a delivery or a pregnancy, or is there no guarantee? Do they restart?
It's not something that you can't guarantee, because sometimes you don't know what's causing the issue, right? It could be the uterus. When the intended mom was doing the process herself, you assume it's the uterus, then you come to a surrogate and you're still having the same outcome. So we're still trying to figure out, is it the eggs, is it the sperm, what is happening here,
right,
why it's not taking. So there is no guarantee, but if something didn't work out, it takes 2 to 3 tries to achieve success via IVF. So if the first try doesn't work, the surrogate stops taking medication for the cycle and starts with another one. And we hope for the best in the second try.
But as far as my investment as a parent, okay, I've come to you and I've worked with this, and we've gone through, let's just say the worst, that there's something happens during delivery. Do I need to start that process over again, both from the beginning and financially and everything else as well? Or is that...
If you've got all the way to delivery, unfortunately,
okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And are there any insurances that offer something like that? That would, independent insurance companies that would reimburse this? Or it seems like there should be a market for, insurance companies are greedy as heck, that somebody would be willing to take a risk on that.
To be honest, I don't think so. Because you're paying so many different parties for this process. You have your attorneys, you have the medical team, you have the surrogate compensation, you have the agency, the psychologist. There are so many different parties involved. I do know that the fertility clinics have certain packages for egg donors where they have money back guaranteed programs, that if they don't have a live baby, they will receive that money back that they invested on the medical side.
Okay. You mentioned surrogate compensation. And I guess that was should go without, sort of being obvious, but the surrogates are compensated.
They are, yeah.
For carrying the child, mm-hmm. and obviously their medical expenses are covered by insurance or by the family that, mm-hmm. Somehow to do that, and then they, on top of that, they do get a stipend, or I don't know, just a flat fee or whatever it is for doing that.
Yeah, they receive a compensation that's spread out throughout their pregnancy, so they're not, getting this one lump sum. They get sent certain funds at confirmation of heartbeat, and then at certain milestones. That's the word.
Now, as far as the Center for Surrogate Parenting, where does your role stop in this process? Do you end once you have matched the surrogate with the family and passed it off, if you will, to a medical thing, or is your process all the way through to the very end and delivery and back home? And
yeah, we're working with them throughout. We have surrogate coordinators who are supporting our surrogates. We have case managers that are working with the intended parents throughout. All the mental health professionals that we work with are there acting as counsellors for both sides.
And the trust coordinators that submit all the payments on the behalf of the couple, and they are able to answer any financial questions all throughout the process. So we remain in the case beginning to end, But we are not medical professionals, so when it comes to the pregnancy, we're going to go by what the doctor is recommending and the routine checkups set by the doctor and the physician in the case.
Yeah, obviously you guys aren't medical professionals, but you're bringing just a really miraculous service to some people that have normally, I don't say normally, but just aren't able to experience that. And I think that's, you've, sort of the go-between to be able to figure it out. We joke and say about, Match.com and online dating, but, to a degree, there's a lot of parallels there. And I think it makes all the sense in the world to do that. If, you're unable to conceive and you do want a family, I think, what you're doing is a beautiful thing. How many families in Maryland do you know? How did we end up here in Annapolis? If their client base is, international and surrogates are all over the United States, are all your surrogates in the United States?
Yes, we only work with surrogates in the United States. So there's certain states, this is my understanding of it, Perla, you might have more information. There's certain states where surrogacy is more favourable, where the laws make things easier. So California is one of the main ones, and Maryland was one of the main ones as well.
Okay.
So I think that's why we have offices in California.
Yeah,
and
we wanted
Maryland.
to have a presence in both coasts, and also to make it more accessible to people coming from Europe, for example. We are closer, we are close to DC, it's easy to get to us than going all the way to the West Coast.
Okay. So there was nothing, just a business decision to locate in a market that was convenient for pretty much for your customers. That makes sense. Well, if anybody wants more information, they can find that out of creatingfamilies.com is your website.
Yep.
And there are so many reasons why somebody would want to go the surrogacy route. We've talked about same-sex couples. We've talked about singles that may want a child. We've got just unable to conceive, traditional couples. We've got, there's medical complications that may come through. There's any number of reasons, and it's certainly a very viable opportunity. For those that are considering, I would certainly say, those that are considering adoption or some type of a surrogacy, I think it makes all the sense in the world to do something like that. Is there anything else that we missed or that you need to?
I think it is important for the couples to do the research. Couples and surrogates do the research and check the agency track record before you sign up with anybody, because we don't want to be taking any risk with all the money that they are investing.
That's one thing that I did want to ask, and we talked about the surrogacy group and that Greg Blosser, who's been arrested and whatnot. How do you check out a surrogacy agency? What are the red flags that somebody should look for that? I've got to imagine somebody says, "Yeah, we're going to take care of it. We're going to guarantee you a blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby with a square jaw, and we just need a check for $250,000, and we'll do it." That's a giant red flag. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you cannot make any guarantees.
Okay.
That is number one. I would look at the amount of years that the agency has been around, the amount of experience that they have. There is a separation of professions that we believe is very important. We have a case manager that deals with helping the couples and the surrogates on each side with their process, and we only do that. But then you have a mental health professional that is going to take care of the psychological aspects of the process and the matching process. Then you have an attorney that is outside of the agency who deals with the legal process, so that we can all hold each other accountable for what we're doing. There are many agencies that have one person doing everything, and that is worrisome because of availability. You can't do it all, and you may be out, and who's going to cover for you? So that's one of the things that I think is important also for the intended parents and surrogates to look. What amount of support they're going to have, how many professionals they're going to have in their case. They could ask for referrals. They could meet with the agency. If they can do it face-to-face, that's always better than a Skype meeting. Check them out, look at their offices, and ask for referrals. If you are a surrogate, ask if you can speak with somebody that is doing the process or has done the process with the agency. And the same on the other side, if you are intended parents, ask for referrals so that you can talk to other people that have experienced the process, and they can share with you any information that you want to learn about outside of the business side.
Okay, and then if somebody were interested in becoming a surrogate, would they go to creatingfamilies.com?
Same website, creatingfamilies.com. There's different areas for intended parents to apply and surrogates to apply. They can phone us as well if they want questions, like the phone number.
One of the things that we take pride of is that we pre-screen our surrogates. So we do all of the screening of any candidate that applies to our program before they are presented to the intended parents. I think that is also very important to know because in average, only about 20% of the applicants are going to pass the screening process. And so that is something that I think the intended parents should look at, because if you're being matched with somebody that has not been screened yet, and then you have to do the screening, it may be months or years before you get to a candidate that can actually be a viable surrogate.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, we want to do everything we can on our end so that once they're matched, they can move forward without any complications.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it seems that you want to make sure that as much as possible, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted before we start the process. So
we can't clear them medically, seeing as though we're not doctors, but we want to do as much as we can.
You're dealing with a hugely emotional thing for everybody involved, and you want to make sure that there's no as few letdowns as possible, throughout the whole process and disappointment. Because they've got a lifetime ahead of them with a new family. Well, I'll tell you thank you very much to Becky Morgan and Perla we're going to do something to Perla Piekutowski from the Center for Surrogate Parenting, and you guys are right here in Annapolis. So it's I would suggest if anybody is interested in becoming a surrogate, or certainly if you're considering alternative ways of starting a family, to check it out. Again, the website is creatingfamilies.com, and I think you guys are doing just a really great service, and I think I learned a ton of stuff that I had no idea before, and you really got me thinking about what was involved in this. But I thank you very much for your time, and
thank you.
Good luck, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them at all the regular places: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.